So welcome to today's webinar. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Kate Stone, who's going to give you a wave, who's Head of Philanthropic Giving here at Australian Philanthropic Services. And my name is Judith Fiander. I'm the CEO here at APS. We will get stuck in to our seminar straight away. But first things first, and this is always important to do at significant occasions, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I am working today, which is the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I acknowledge their continuing connection to land, water, and culture, and more widely, I acknowledge the 65,000 plus years of Indigenous history in this country, and all elders past, present, and the emerging next generation of leaders. I'd like to especially welcome any First Nations people who are online with us today. Thank you for joining us. And welcome everyone to today's webinar. You can find webinars on just about anything if you look, but it's fair to say that understanding APS and our clients and structured giving generally is a pretty niche topic. So thank you for your interest and your attendance today. We've actually got several hundred people on the call, which is fantastic. Great, we will get started straight away. And the one thing I didn't check with the team was who's in charge of making the slides move. And there you go, just like that. Got that, brilliant, fantastic. Thank you. So let me start with just telling you for a couple of minutes about Australian Philanthropic Services. We are now Australia's leading independent provider of philanthropic services. We've been in the space for over 13 years, and we work entirely in this small niche that I mentioned before. So we work with private ancillary funds. We have the fastest growing public ancillary fund in the country of its type, comparing like to like, and we offer giving services to all of our APS clients. We are a highly experienced team. There are 50 of us now, having grown over the last 13 years, and we are a not-for-profit ourselves. So nobody is making a dollar out of doing what we do. We do it as a service to the community. There is no profit motive. And we have a very high profile board of directors. We are very fortunate to have people who sit on top ASX 200 listed companies who donate their time to Australian Philanthropic Services and assist us, and they have been there, a lot of them, for 10 years, which is just fantastic. So the next slide, please. These are our vital statistics for financial year FY25. And this is all of the work that is done by the people at APS and by our clients. So we have more than 1,000 clients. We're close to 1,100 clients, in fact, now, but this is at 30th of June FY25. That consists of 369 private ancillary funds and well over 700 people who have giving funds within the APS Foundation. I am going to talk about the difference between those two entities shortly, so that'll be coming your way in a minute. Last year, our clients, fantastically, in a new record, gave away $242 million to quite a number of different charities, 2,660 different charities. That is a lot of work to get that money out the door to fantastic places, like all of the places that you work, I'm suggesting, and it is an incredibly satisfying thing to look at the year in terms of what's been achieved. Next slide, please. We've just done, in fact, Kate Stone has organised our first ever across the board client survey. And so when I look at this slide and it says the motivation for establishing an ancillary fund or opening a giving fund within a public ancillary fund, the first thing that it should say at the top of the slide, correct me if I'm wrong, Kate, is the primary motivation of all of our clients by a large margin is actually the wish to give, the desire to give and support the charitable community is what drives our clients. Some of the things on the slide here, I'll just talk about for a couple of minutes because they are the triggers, if you like. They are the set of circumstances that might prompt someone to take up the opportunity to start an ancillary fund. But it really is first and foremost about the giving, which is just fantastic. So often we find that people start an ancillary fund or open a giving fund when something has occurred in their lives, whether that's the sale of a business or some other asset. They've perhaps received a lovely bonus or perhaps an inheritance of some sort. And it provides them with the opportunity to give more thoughtfully, more strategically, more intentionally than they have perhaps before, because they are able to put aside a lump of money from which they then make grants over a period of time. So all of those happy sets of circumstances, except perhaps for the inheritance, because that's probably come with the loss of someone. But apart from that circumstance, all of the other good sets of circumstances that prompt people to give usually come attached to some kind of tax event, perhaps a significant tax bill. And this is an opportunity for people to make good use of a tax bill in furthering charitable causes within the community. So the reason for that is that people are able to make a donation into an ancillary fund upfront and receive a tax deduction in that year, or they can spread that tax deduction over up to 5 years. And that is true of both sorts of ancillary fund. So the funds go in, they're irrevocably gifted. People can't get them back. It's just like giving the funds to any other charity. The entities that are established ancillary funds are charitable and tax-free entities. The money is invested while it sits inside the ancillary fund. And as I say, there are tax-free returns during that period of time. Like lots of charities, they are tax-free entities. And of course, over time, if the money is well invested in various sorts of assets, that can actually contribute, as can further donations, but contribute to growing the pool of funds that's available for charitable use over the long term. Gifts are required to be made to charities at a particular percentage every year, and that's 4 or 5% depending on the kind of ancillary fund that it is. So any DGR Item 1 charity is able to receive a grant from an ancillary fund. And part of what we do is we work with clients to ensure that they are giving in the areas that they feel emotionally attached to, that provides them with joy and satisfaction. And we don't work as a matchmaker, if I can use that term, but we do certainly provide clients with information around causal areas and around charities if they ask us and they are looking for some suggestions around how perhaps to start giving in a particular area. Kate will speak more to that in due course. Next slide, please. So let's come to the bit of detail for you around ancillary funds, and I hope you find this useful. There are two types of ancillary funds. There's a private ancillary fund and a public ancillary fund. So a private ancillary fund, or PAF as they are commonly called, is usually for people who have quite a significant amount of money to irrevocably gift into the entity. So we say you need about $1 million or more in order to justify the ongoing running costs and in order to see the benefit in terms of compounding investment returns over time. And these are standalone entities, and directors have full control over the governance, the giving, and the investment decisions. We have over 360 odd about of those kinds of entities. So that means we work with about 360 different families. Small number of them are corporates, but they are mostly family groupings that we work with. And they are looking for the control and responsibility that comes with having your own entity. So as it says on the slide there, you can think of a PAF as being similar to a self-managed super fund. in terms of it's a standalone entity and just there for a small group of people to contribute to and make grants from and so on. In contrast to that, a public ancillary fund is an already existing entity. So when I talk about the APS Foundation with 700 plus people who have giving funds within it, that trust, that entity exists. There's a board of directors. The trustee is a corporate entity. The board of directors makes the decisions in terms of investments, and in a technical sense, it makes the decisions around what charities are supported. And I say that in a technical sense because as a matter of trust law, the trustee is the entity that has to sign off on all of the grants going out the door to the various charities. How that works in practice is for us in particular, because we are a not-for-profit entity and our purpose is to support charitable giving and grow charitable giving within the Australian community. Then if a client makes a suggestion or recommendation, as we call it, to us about where they would like their slice of the APS Foundation to go in terms of supporting and making a charitable gift, so long as that charity is an Item 1 DGR and we have done those couple of steps of due diligence to ensure that they are up to date with their reporting with the ACNC, that they have the appropriate DGR status with the ATO, then we will action that gift. The trustee at APS Foundation will action that gift and the funds will be sent off to the particular charity. This is really a very simple and accessible way for people to move into structured giving, because you can open one of these accounts, if you like, or sub-funds that they are sometimes called. We call them giving funds. You can open one of these with $40,000. Now, having $40,000 sitting in your top drawer or your pocket is still a lot of money to be able to find to make an irrevocable gift around and put it inside the APS Foundation. That is certainly true, but it is a lot less than $1 million, and there are a lot more Australians who are in a position to put away $40,000. That's a minimum, just to get you started. There are a lot more Australians who are in a position to be able to contribute towards the philanthropic capital that we are building over time for the future use of the charitable sector. So we find that this is growing enormously each and every year as more people find out about it. We wish that more people knew about ancillary funds, and that is what we spend a lot of our time doing, is educating financial advisors, accountants, lawyers, and dealing wherever possible with clients who come to us. They might find us via Google, they might find us via media coverage that we are grateful to have when it arrives, because we'd like more and more Australians to set up giving funds and or private ancillary funds, but certainly giving funds, because there are so many more Australians who do have the wherewithal to experience the joy of structured giving and what that brings to people over time. If there's one thing that is common amongst all of our clients, apart from the desire to give, then at the other end of that, it would be the satisfaction and the joy, the emotional satisfaction and joy that they get out of giving in this structured way. So what have we got on the next slide? Okay, that's a nice, neat summary comparing the two sorts of entities. You can see that there's a slight difference between the annual distribution between the two styles of entity, and you can also see what the APS median gift size is that comes out of those two different forms of ancillary funds. That is probably of great interest to you on the basis that often charities look at PAFs and think that they are all potentially, I don't know, Minderoo or Paul Ramsey or something of that size. That is not the case. That is not where the substantial growth in philanthropic giving in Australia is taking place. It is terrific to have extremely large donors, and I'm sure that can make a difference, huge difference to you and the charitable work that your organisation does. But such large entities are few and far between, and I'm sure if you've got a major gifts team and a fundraising team, then you know exactly what that looks like and how much time and effort that can take in order to track down such people and establish a relationship. But in terms of APS clients, the 1,100 of them, the gifts are in smaller size. So out of APS Foundation, median gift, not average, median is about $3,000. And out of our private ancillary funds, the median gift is about $10,000. Now that is a decent size gift, but it is not $5 million over 3 years that you might be seeing in terms of major gifts and so on. But there are 1,100 of them, and we hope to do more than double that number over the next few years. So we would like to see more and more Australians with sums of money put aside for charitable giving for your organisation's use in the future. What have we got coming up next, team? This is my opportunity to hand you over to Kate Stone, who's going to talk about the next set of slides. And I might just say to you, which I did not say at the beginning, is there is the chat function, usual chat function that sits in any Zoom arrangement. So if you've got questions that you would like us to address during the rest of the time we have together, then by all means, we would be happy to do so. If there's anything we can't answer on the spot because we've run out of time or because we may not even have the answer, then we'll go and do some research and get back to you and make sure that we do provide you with an answer. Kate Stone, take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to talk a bit about our clients.
On mute, or is that just me?
No, I don't think I'm on mute. Can everybody hear me? Jude can't. I'm going to keep talking, and somebody can send me a message if you can't hear me. How about we do that? And a message just came through. Yes, we can. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate that. Excellent. I will continue. So this case study, which you probably read while we've been talking, is a really great example of one of our clients who's happy to share some of the details around their foundation. But it really shows, I guess, the value and the benefit of setting up an ancillary fund. So the Unsworth family established their private ancillary fund in 2014. You can see that they put $2 million in at the initial outset of that. Since then, they've given away over $1 million to a variety of different charities. And as of the end of last financial year, we're still kind of finalising figures for this financial year, but as of the end of last financial year, the balance in that path was $2.5 million. So they started with $2 million 10 years ago. They've given away $1 million, and they've now still got $2.5 million in there. And that's because of the investment focus that they've had and the way that the corpus, or the kind of money that isn't granted out, has been invested over that period of time. So essentially, what it really shows you is, I guess, two things: the value of being able to make that initial donation. So rather than giving $2 million at the time to charities, which they could well have done, they chose to set up the structure, and over time they will give out significantly more than that $2 million. So if they wound it up today, then they would actually end up giving away close to $3.6 million instead of that initial $2 million. They're actually not going to, and one of the many reasons, as Jude pointed out, that people like to set up these structures is because it can create an intergenerational legacy. And it can provide an opportunity for generations to give back. So what the Unsworth family is actually doing, which is why the lovely photo is there, is they are handing the foundation over to the inverted commas next generation. So the next generation, their children, have stepped up, they're sitting on the board, and they're starting to take responsibility for the foundation, and we'll be able to do that moving forward. So not only in the long term are they giving away significantly more money than they would have originally done, but they're actually able to create a connection within their family and a culture of generosity and giving back in the family. So it's a really wonderful thing for families to be able to do together. other thing, I think, just before we sort of talk about the detail of our clients and connecting with our clients, is just to situate ancillary funds in the overall giving space. So this chart that you can see, it's a little bit old, but the data, sort of waxes and wanes a little bit, probably won't be that different. Essentially what this is private giving. So it excludes any government funding that goes to charities. And what you will notice, obviously, is a couple of things. The first is that private ancillary funds and public ancillary funds together are about 9% of all giving. So whilst they're significant and they are growing, and we are, trying to enable that growth, they're actually a relatively small part of the overall giving pie. Other includes predominantly corporate and a number of other different structures, but that's sort of where corporate giving sits. And the reason for sharing this is just for, particularly I know sometimes there are people whose boards will say you need to go after ancillary funds and they're where we're going to get all our fundraising from. Really important part, but they're not going to be the sole solution to your fundraising. So really having that diversified fundraising approach is important. PAFs and ancillary funds aren't going to be sort of the initial solution. But having said that, obviously, we are hoping that it will grow. I think everybody knows there's, the numbers have gone up, I think, from 3.5 trillion to almost 5.4 trillion potential intergenerational wealth transfer over the next sort of 20 years. And, if we do some rough calculations and we imagined that 5% of that went into setting up ancillary funds, that would put something like an extra $9 billion into the charitable marketplace each year. So how amazing would that be if we could all make that happen over the next sort of 20 years? So small, but hopefully growing and hopefully having a big impact, I think is the way to think about the position of ancillary funds in the marketplace. So the question that we get asked a lot is, okay, that's great. How do I actually get on the radar, and how do I connect with APS givers and PAFs and giving funds? And so I think there's a number of things that we really like to try and be transparent about. The first thing is that ancillary funds have, essentially the majority of them have privacy. So whilst they have really strict reporting requirements to the ACNC and the ATO, just like, all charitable entities do, you can't actually find a database that has a list of all of the private and public ancillary funds out there. And if you do come across ones where people are sort of selling those lists, I would just urge you to treat it with caution. It's not necessarily going to cover the whole spectrum of the ancillary funds that are out there. And I know it's an investment for charities. So, please do your research before you look to purchase anything. What that means is that, it's not that easy to necessarily go out and search and find them. From an APS perspective, we do respect our clients' privacy. So what we can't do is we can't sort of introduce your charity to our clients at your request. We can, however, do it at their request. So as Jude mentions, our clients are the ones who decide where they're going to support and which causes and charities they're interested in supporting. So we aren't like, I guess, a perpetual who have a public-facing grant round. That's not the kind of way that we operate. Pretty much all of our clients are still alive, kicking, and making wonderful decisions around where they want to donate money to. So when they come to us, we will let them know about charities that we're aware of. We'll do research. We will try and speak to as many people as we possibly can in the sector to enable that information sharing with charities, from charities to clients. So we will do it at the request of clients rather than necessarily pushing that out at the request of charities. So just so that you understand how we try and support our clients in that way. The other thing our clients do is they determine the level of engagement they like to have with charities. So again, we really do encourage our clients to engage with you directly. We see how impactful that is, both from their satisfaction and also from your relationship and your fundraising, your impact perspective. We know it has mutual benefits. So we will encourage our clients to do that. And most of them do. Most of them love engaging with the charities that they support. There might be a handful who sort of do it at a hands-off level and don't necessarily want that engagement, but a lot of them do. And so that leads us on to kind of the, we don't gatekeep. So we're not looking to get in the way of your relationship with charities. If you have a relationship with an APS client, then by all means, please continue that relationship. You don't need to keep us informed other than some of the details that we need, which we'll jump to at a kind of practical slide in a second. But we're not looking to get in the way. We're really looking to facilitate those relationships and those connections and that money out to the community. And as Jed said, we also don't match make. So we don't explicitly look at how we can connect individuals and charities and clients, but we will do that at the request of our clients themselves. And the other thing I think that we take quite seriously at APS is that we are cause and charity agnostic. So we don't have particular causes or particular charities that we will push to our clients. We very much try and understand what's happening in the marketplace and support our clients giving in the way that they like to give. And that, I guess, is a really important position that we take. What it does mean, and we'll probably get onto it in a second, is that we, as a not-for-profit, we are resource constrained, just like I'm sure every single person on this call is. It does mean that we can't accept incoming requests for meetings and coffees. I love coffee. I'm a caffeine addict, but I can't actually get around and meet all 29,000 DGR ones. There just aren't enough hours in the day, unfortunately. So if you do sort of message us or request, email in or call and ask for a meeting, some of those we will be able to take, and you might get lucky and it might align with, a client asking us about the cause area that you work in, but a lot of them we won't necessarily be able to respond to just because of the volume of requests that we get. So it's not personal. We do as many as we can. We have other ways to kind of collect information and understand your charities and your causes. But please do understand that, we can't necessarily respond to every single one of those requests as much as I love coffee. So the other thing that we often get asked about is, well, how do your clients make decisions about the causes and the charities that they're going to support? And there's a phrase that sort of floats around the social sector, which is, if you've met one philanthropist, you've met one philanthropist. Everybody is very different in terms of the things that they care about and the way they make decisions and how they engage their family and how they connect with charities. But I guess over the kind of 12, 13 years that we've been operating, we've seen some patterns, if you like, in the ways that people think about their giving. So these three giving styles are just examples of kind of across at the range of our, 1,100 clients, different ways that people approach their giving. So the first group of clients that we have are what we've called responsive clients. They are people who tend to react and respond to opportunities that present themselves either through, people they know or their networks or conferences or things that they see in the media. They will look at opportunities. They don't necessarily do really thorough due diligence or need a lot of information. They'll kind of do a gut reaction on whether or not they want to fund. They will do that. They don't necessarily commit to long-term funding, so they may be doing sort of one-off gifts. Maybe it might go over a couple of years, but it tends to sort of be less, I guess, stable in terms of their giving. On the plus side, they don't actually need a lot back by way of reporting. They're not looking for in-depth, understanding. They may read your annual report or an impact report that you share, but they're really not asking for, and they're not kind of, demanding clients in terms of donors, in terms of what they particularly would like to see. They're the kind of people that will think about, I guess, in terms of their approach to understanding, they think about outcomes. What has happened as a result of my funding is pretty much, sorry, not even outcomes, but like outputs, if you like, what activities have taken place as a result of the funding that I've provided. And that's kind of the level of understanding that they need. The second group is what we've called considered, and these are probably the bulk of our clients. I often say to people, think about, and Jude touched on this, think about APS clients as sitting in your major donor bucket. So they're not going to sit in your trusts and foundations teams. Your trusts and foundations teams are the ones that are going to be dealing with the Minderos or the Paul Ramseys or, some of the other foundations out there. Our clients don't run grant rounds. They don't do those kind of formal approaches. So they're much more likely to reflect the kind of giving approaches that your major donors have. And the considered group, I think, are a really good example of that. They often make decisions based on their own personal lived experience. So the causes that they care about are things that they or other people in their sort of families or friendship groups have experienced. So it might be that they support breast cancer because mum had breast cancer, or they look at mental health because their nephew has had mental health challenges over time. So really it is about that kind of lived experience and what they've seen impact the people that they care about. Having said that, they are open to other things. So they're open to new opportunities. They're often the types of clients that will donate to disaster or, you know, crisis or those kind of things. They'll add to their giving and donate to specific situations when they happen. They're more likely to be sort of slightly more long-term, you know, you might call them short-term. So they'll fund for sort of, you know, 3-year stints or 3 or 4 year stints. Other than, you know, there might be 1 or 2 charities that they're really closely connected with because of that lived experience. But they're more open to, I guess, slightly more longer term funding than that responsive group. And the way that they, I guess, think about it is, you know, we had sort of an outputs approach. They think about understanding their funding from an outcome. So what's happened as a result of my funding. So that's one of the kind of main things that they are thinking about when they're looking at funding and looking at understanding and, I guess, renewing their funding. The third group, and again, a smaller group than the sort of considered group, are what we have called our purpose-led approach. So the purposeful group are really thinking from a strategic, long-term impact legacy type of approach. They're much less likely to waver in terms of the causes and the charities that they support. They are the ones who may have written down and sort of sat down and thought about a specific strategic approach. They may have a written strategy. They may sort of look at tools and ways to help them support their funding. We have a very small number of clients that have staff as part of their foundations, and literally, you know, a handful, and they would sit in this bucket. So again, you know, having staff is very, very rare, but of anybody, it's this group that are likely to have staff to help them execute on their strategy. They're the people that, you know, again, often align outside of their philanthropy. So their investments, you know, their purchasing power, their consumption, sometimes, but not always, the careers of people in the family will align with their values and their philanthropic values that are guiding the giving decisions. And they're the people who are impact led. So they're very much thinking about, you know, what's the social change that's been catalyzed by the giving that I am making. So when we think about it, and, you know, we can kind of think of this as a journey. So, and Jude hates that word, she'll cringe when I say it, but, you know, some of our clients can move through those stages, but not all of them. Some of them are responsive and always will be responsive. Some of them don't start as responsive and go straight to being purposeful. So it's not necessarily a linear transition, although it can be for certain of our clients. And I've noticed that there are some questions. I will get to those maybe after we just finish the slides. So we'll come back to those. So, you know, with having said all of that, what can you actually do? So some of these, if you like, tips that we've got might feel really silly, and they will probably be things you know, but hopefully the reminder is useful, or there might be 1 or 2 suggestions that we make that you haven't actually considered yet. But the first thing to say is that the basics really do matter. So when you have any donor, obviously, but when you have APS donors who make a gift to your organisation, say thank you. Often, and, you know, there's probably a video up on our website. I ran a webinar last year with a couple of our clients who talked about the fact that they will test the waters. So they will give smaller grants to start with to see how you engage with them as a donor before they look to move to giving larger grants. So at the very least, please do acknowledge the gift and say thank you. And the second thing is send the receipt. And it sounds really silly, but certainly APS and APS clients need the receipt for their reporting to the ACNC and the ATO. They have to be audited, so they need those receipts. You would be amazed that, you know, I just came out of a meeting with my team where we will be chasing several hundred receipts out of those 7,226, I think it was, gifts that were made last year, because the charities haven't sent through receipts for those gifts. So not only are you helping out APS and my team, but actually you're helping out those clients, and it is the basics of that relationship. You know, if they're not going to get a receipt for the first gift they make, they are much less likely to make future gifts. So make sure you've got your systems in place. Make sure you're doing just the basics to start out with. And then, you know, again, I don't think I need to tell anybody on the call, but the communication is really important. As we said, you know, if you met one philanthropist, you met one philanthropist. We often get asked what level of reporting and what sort of things should we be sending to clients. The best thing to do, not surprisingly, is ask. Different people are interested in different levels of reporting. I generally say if you can fit something on one page, then please fit it on one page, because we all know how, you know, bad our attention spans are, and that people don't necessarily read really long documents. But do talk to your clients about what their communication preferences are. What sort of reporting do they want to receive? What sort of information do they want to receive? Do they want to know about your events? Do they want to know about your, you know, fundraising campaigns? And then respect those preferences. So again, you know, as much as you can, and I know it's easier for some charities than others, but put some systems in place that enable you to manage those communication preferences of the clients, because it really does make a difference. And then the last thing, I guess, is be creative. As I said, there isn't a, you know, a comprehensive database of PAFs out there and giving fund holders out there that you can access. So the way to find out who's out there and who's in the space is to do those creative things. So, you know, attend industry events. If you've got the bandwidth, if you have the capacity, go along to, you know, Philanthropy Australia events or things like the Funding Network or 10 by 10. You just never know who you're going to meet when you turn up at those events. And I have talked to charities before who've come across, you know, somebody who is now a major donor at industry events. Obviously, you need to be aware of non-solicitation policies and all of those kind of things, but, you know, there are opportunities to meet people when you're out there in the sector, and understanding, you know, what donors are interested in and where they're looking for connection. The other sort of things that we've talked about is really simple things like when you send out your annual report, could you do a 1-minute video from your CEO or your chair that just talks about the impact of your work? Because as we know, some people love the detail of an annual report. Some people want a really short, simple, easy way to connect. And, you know, video is one of those things that isn't necessarily expensive anymore. It can be done on a mobile phone. It doesn't have to be high production value. And I know there's actually, I can't remember their name to give them a plug, but I know there is an organization that does free training for charities in terms of doing videos. If anybody's interested, I can probably find out their name and send it to them. But, you know, there are organizations out there that will help you do things like that. The other thing is, as you know, your next donor is your existing donor and their network. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask for referrals or for recommendations from your existing donors, because they're going to be your best opportunities. And then I guess the last thing to do is, you know, I get in trouble for saying this on this call, but have a look at people who sit in your sector, who are working on the kind of causes that you work at. Have a look at their annual reports, see who's listed, see who's in there and who's funding in the space, as, you know, might be a potential opportunity. So I think that was all we were going to share. I know there are a number of questions. So we've got a couple of minutes, don't we? So the first question was on, do we support charities who auspice through DGR1 charities? The simple answer is yes. So if you're a non-DGR and you have an auspicing agreement with the DGR1, then APS clients are able to donate, obviously, to that DGR1 to have it passed on to your organisation. Given all the challenges you described with finding out about different causes and charities, how do you try to reduce sector inequity in your approach? Majority of funding always going to well-known causes or larger charities? So really good question. Funnily enough, when our clients come to us and they ask us for recommendations, or not recommendations, but suggestions on charities that they could look at, I would say 9 times out of 10, they are looking for smaller organisations. So often the larger organisations find it difficult because, you know, we won't necessarily put some of those larger organisations on the list that we share with clients, because they're really looking to help, you know, deal with, to find out about organisations that they might not have heard of, but to help deal with the inequity. I'll come back to that point. So apologies if I'm freezing. Apparently I am. So I'm not sure how much of this is coming through. So one of the things that we do is we try and work really hard and have team, you know, our team does a lot of research. We talk to a lot of people in the industry. We try very hard to make sure that we are finding out about smaller, less well-known charities that don't necessarily have those large marketing budgets. So as much as possible, we will do that by looking at multiple different channels to try and understand who's out there in the marketplace. And you'll be pleased to know that often that's what clients are looking for. What's the best way to communicate with PAFs that support us? Yes, so in terms of communicating with PAFs, obviously the information and the email addresses that you receive would be the best way to do that. What you may often find is that you know a major donor, and then you realize that they have a PAF or a structure outside of that. So sometimes our clients are actually donors that you already know. But in terms of communicating, if they're a giving fund, it's through the foundation at email address. And if they are PAF, it is through that at APS PAF email. We'll be transparent with you. Those inboxes get a lot of information. So unless it's something specific to a gift or a donation that has been made, or something personal for those particular directors or giving fund holders, they may not actually read that. So it's probably best not to sort of put that email on your general marketing or, you know, events emails. Really try and use those for the important personal and one-to-one communications.
Can I jump in there, Kate, just for a moment?
Please do. Yes.
And say, just to be clear, that's exactly right in terms of your general communications. But if you send something specific to a client that is clearly addressed to them and is personal and relates to their gift, rest assured we do pass all of that on. We have a system for doing that. And Kate, in fact, is just at the beginning of building a much larger system to be able to transfer even more information for clients in terms of charities that they already give to and charities that they might like to give to. So if it's personal, it will get passed on. If it's your general newsletter, it will not.
Yes, thank you. I will, the last point on creativity RE board, and I'm sorry, I missed that. I'm not sure what that is. Erin, if you want to get in touch with us, we can come back to you on that, because I'm not actually sure what that question is. And then we had, for charities who do not have a relationship with you, would it be useful to share an organisational case for support? So yes, it will be. We have a database that we can save that. We might share the appropriate email address to do that with. And then what I will also say is that because there are a couple of hundred people on this call, if everybody emails a case for support, it's going to take the team a long time to get through all of those. So please be patient. You may not necessarily hear anything back from us, and it may take us a while to get through that. What else have we got? So what percentage of faith-based charities from your charity client portfolio? Do you know that? So that's a good question. I'm actually not sure off the top of my head. And it'd be interesting to know. I guess part of the challenge we have is, you know, whether or not how you define faith-based charities. But there are certainly, you know, we have, I guess the thing to say about, and I know everybody's always interested in which causes our clients support, because I think of the breadth of clients that we have, and because they are, you know, reflective, I guess, of a major donor base, they pretty much align, you know, give or take a little bit. They're relatively consistent with the overall giving patterns that you see in Australia by causes. Obviously, you know, a lot of there are faith-based organisations that are DGR2s rather than DGR ones, so it does have to be a DGR1 for our clients to support it. But there are definitely, I know that there's faith-based giving amongst our client base. What else have we met?
We've got a couple of questions there, Kate, around how do charities actually make it onto a give list? How do they get known?
Yeah. So I think we will share the email address. So for our database, we both have a link where we collect sort of basic details on your information, and you can attach, a case for support or an annual report, those kind of things, to that. And then I guess in terms of getting on a give list, it's very much depending on the request of clients. So if they are asking for charities that align with you in terms of the work that you do, your geography, the people you support, the size of your organization in terms of, I guess, usually the revenue that you have, then we will look to include you into those lists. How are we done?
Here's a good one. Is sport represented as a sector? So I'm happy to have a crack at that one.
Yeah,
Kate.
go for it.
So thank you very much for the question. The answer, as you probably already know, is that sport in and of itself is not a DGR category. So it is not likely that ordinary sporting or ordinary community sporting organisations would be item 1 DGR charities. However, because it's not a cause of charity, a head of charity. However, sport in the service of some other head of charity, like relief of disadvantage or mental health or a variety of other things, definitely comes up in terms of where our clients support and give funds to. So it does indeed, but it has to be via an item 1 DGR charity. I might just point out that some clients give to, say, for instance, the Sports Foundation, and people who come through APS Foundation, through the Public Ancillary Fund, because of a technical reason around when it was established and the kind of law that was in place at the time of its establishment, can make grants to the Sports Foundation through APS Foundation. Private ancillary funds that have been established since 2013, I think it is, 2013, 2014, cannot, generally speaking, do that. So there is a level of complexity, and you might possibly be aware that the Australian Sports Foundation has a charitable fund, a charitable trust through which some projects are run that does have the right status. So it's a little complex, but thank you. That's a really good question.
I think there's 2 more questions that I can see, so maybe I'll talk about one of them, and I might ask Jude if you would like to talk about the second one.
Sure.
First one is, do you see generational trends in giving? I think yes. Again, it is probably hugely stereotyping to say that they are completely different, but I think there are some trends. I guess the trends are that things like climate and environment, mental health, identity, and sort of general inequity are things that younger generations are more interested and more connected to by way of funding. I think the other thing is that often, there was a nice quote, and it was from an American family, but it probably rings true here. Was a sort of younger generation person saying that our grandparents built the buildings and put their names on it, and we care about what's happening inside the buildings. So a sort of slightly different lens in terms of how they're approaching things. I think there's probably also a bit more of a recognition of the importance of, whether you want to call it prevention or systems change, depending on, all sorts of different areas that you're working in. But certainly funding, I guess, upstream, and things like advocacy are probably becoming more well known and more considered by ways of funding. So that's probably the very short answer to that question. Jude, did you want me to answer? There's a question on investments for the APS Foundation.
Happy to take that.
Yeah. Do you want to talk to the So the question, you go for it.
Is What ethical screening takes place for APS Foundation investments? Thank you for that good question. So there are two kinds of portfolios that sit within the APS Foundation. There is what we call our general portfolio, and then there is a more ESG focused portfolio, which is just called the focused portfolio. So to be clear, that is not a portfolio of impact investments, if that's what you were thinking about, but there are differences between the foci of the investment strategies and the portfolios between those two different groupings, and they are managed by different people. So it's true to say that across both portfolios there's an instant negative screen in terms of things that are screened out, and they are all the usual horror stories that you would expect. So none of this, none of that, none of something else. In terms of a more focused approach to screening, then that does take place for the more ESG focused portfolio. I did hear the manager of that portfolio, David Wright, ex-Zenith Partners, speaking the other day. And because that's a relatively modest-sized portfolio compared to the general portfolio, which is many hundreds of millions in size, he is somewhat limited at this point in terms of the style of investments, and they mostly run through ESG-focused managed funds at this point. As the fund grows to be as large, we hope, as the general portfolio, it's younger in terms of age and therefore size. It's only been around for a smaller number of years than the general portfolio. But when it reaches that kind of size, David has said he will have a lot more freedom in terms of looking around for particular investments that he would like to follow and invest in. There is something I might say about the general portfolio, though. Although it does not have a specific focus in terms of either ESG or impact investments, it actually includes a number of investments that would qualify under those heads if there was in fact such a test for the portfolio. That's just a function of the fact that the portfolio manager has found incredible value and good returns in particular projects that would pass those screens. He looks at investment first and is not his investment strategy does not limit him in terms beyond the negative screen in terms of where he might invest, whereas people who are looking for more screening and more ESG focus will be looking at our focused portfolio. I hope that's helpful and not confusing.
Thanks, Jude. The last question is, if an NFP is larger because it's having a really good impact to a huge number of individual people and families, would this be a disadvantage to not be considered based on scale of operations? So I think in terms of, a lot of our clients coming and asking for smaller organizations, then, realistically, potentially, yes. The flip side to that is that we have a lot of clients who give to larger charities. They're just not necessarily asking us about those and asking us for, to find those because they are more well known. So we have our clients give to, I guess, the whole spectrum of charities in terms of size and impact. And, for some clients, they're looking for, often we talk about our clients taking kind of a risk portfolio approach. Some clients love to have larger established charities that have proven impact and we know they understand and know what they're doing. I assume your charity would fit into that thing. And then they will look at, maybe one or two smaller charities who might be newer, who might be trying different things, who might fail, but hopefully learn from those failures. And so they look at having giving that's sort of spread across different types of charities. The NFP, you do have to be registered with the ACNC. So you have to be a registered charity for the most part. Jude might have some nuance on that one, but you do have to be a registered charity with the ACNC and have DGR1 status or have an auspicing arrangement with a DGR1 partner to get funding from either ancillary fund types. I feel like we might be at the end of questions. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Would you like to finish up, Jude, or would you like me to close this off?
I will simply say thank you to everyone for attending. And Kate, if you wanted to add to that, by all means do so. It's fantastic to see the level of interest that we get. We are here to be helpful, not to be matchmakers or to get in the way of you trying to liaise with people who've made donations to your organisation. Our only purpose here is to facilitate funds getting out to the charitable sector. So don't hesitate to be in touch with us. We have practical limitations, as Kate has outlined, but we're here to help. My name's Jude, and I'm here to help. And this is Kate, and she is too. It's Kate. Anything that you'd like to add?
No, that's great. Jude will help you, and I will help you as well. No, thank you everyone for attending. Hopefully you found that interesting. We've done a recording of this, so we'll be sharing that out in an email in the next week or so. Please do obviously get in touch with us if you have any questions. Also, any feedback is always really valuable, because we want to make this session useful for everybody. So if there's anything that you feel is missing or anything you think needs to be changed, please do feel free to let us know. You don't have to just say, oh, it was great, thank you very much, because you're trying to be kind. That is not necessary. So thank you very much for your time, and have a lovely day, everyone.